Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
Welcome to Workforce Wednesday. We are here for Capturing Career Services, the who, what, when, how, and why, part 2. My name is Olga Scamilla, and I'm your host. So at this time, I want to welcome our presenter, Maria Morrow. And Maria is a program specialist with TWC Adult Education and Literacy Department. Growing up in a military family and having served in the U.S. Navy, she's held many job titles, from working as a sales associate in Japan, serving as a medic to the Marine recruits, to helping people with disabilities obtain and maintain employment as a vocational rehabilitation counselor. Her world experience, mastery in human resource management and organizational development, and her passion for elevating others have been fundamental in her helping people achieve the knowledge and skills they need to have a better quality of life for over 20 years. So welcome, Maria. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Maria.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for Capturing Career Services Part 2. I am Maria Morrow, and I'll be focusing on entering career service activities in teams today. So with the objectives, after today's session, you should be able to recall AEL Letter 0223 and reference OCTAE Program Memo 17-2 Department of Labor Performance Accountability Guidance regarding career and training services. Ooh, that's a mouthful. And then enter career service activities in teams, utilize career service activities desk aid, and apply the knowledge to scenarios. So yes, you are going to get some scenarios today. We're going to start with federal guidance. This comes from the feds, and this little excerpt here is from OCTAE Program Memo 17-2, where federal guidance requires WIOA core programs, such as AEL, to track the average cost per participant that received career and training services. WIOA provides specific definitions for career services that can be found in the OCTAE Program Memo 17-2, and we'll also be discussing these today. If you're not sure how to get to that, at the very end of the session, I do have a slide with the websites for the guidance that I'm referencing today. Now that we know what the feds say, what does TWC say? Well, in AEL Letter 0223 that was published in 2023, it provides guidance on reporting adult education and literacy career services and training services. This letter details what programs have local flexibility to do and no local flexibility to do, such as AEL grant recipients must record in teams each instance of a career service or training service provided to a participant every time a service occurs, as based on the data entry schedule outlined in their grants. Now, for training services, that's tracked differently, and we're not going to be discussing that today. So please reference AEL Letter 0317 if you want to know more about training services. But today we're just going to be focusing on career services. Career service activities are tracked in two separate systems, Teams and CEDAR. The keyword mentioned in both the OCTAE memo and AEL letter is participant. So once someone is enrolled and is participating in services, career service activities can be tracked in Teams. However, there will be activities that you will report in CEDAR that you won't be able to report in Teams, such as recruitment efforts like community outreach or purchasing tests. This is what Kara discussed in February. And again, what I'm going to focus on are the activities that you can report in teams. Before we move forward, I want to go back to a couple cost areas that Kara mentioned last month and clarify them for you. So during part one, we received a question asking if ELL initial assessments counted as a career service activity or not. And as stated here, it says AEL grant recipients must exclude workforce preparation activities, English language acquisition programs, and any other WIOA defined career services not listed in Octave Program Memo 17-2. This is in reference to activities that would be included in an IET. So English language acquisition or the contextualized instruction in an IET cannot be counted as a career service because all IET activities are tracked through training services. However, an initial assessment, such as Best Plus, to determine individuals' English language proficiency before they enter an ESL or EL Civics program or an integrated EL Civics program can be counted. So example number one is a board and an AEL provider may want to partner for an IET program. The board may supply the funding for the workforce prep activity component and the workforce training component, and AEL only provides the contextualized instruction. In this scenario, the board is the one who will calculate the workforce prep expenses as career services. Example number two, it's the same as what I just described, except the AEL partner is paying for both the workforce prep and the contextualized instruction, and the board is only paying for workforce training. So AEL will not report workforce prep expenses towards career services. Why? Because that is something that is included already in an IET. So to the second bullet, it talks about AEL. And I'm going to say AEL for context because I feel like saying AFLA is just it's generalized in the Octave memo and then in the AEL letter. But, we're an AEL program, so I'm just going to say AEL. So identifying support service providers with which the AEL program does not have an existing established relationship and contacting those support service providers to introduce the AEL program to establish points of contact and referral mechanisms. And this is not saying that you cannot count support services. What it's saying is you cannot count outreach to those organizations that provide this support service. So, for example, a new nonprofit that assists eligible individuals with housing opens in your area. The career navigator calls and secures a seat at their next staff meeting to present on AEL services. This outreach cannot be entered as a career service. Example number two, a participant notifies the career navigator that they are having to move from their current residence and will be staying at a shelter. The career navigator believes this participant may be eligible for the new nonprofit services, and after talking to the participant about it, they help the participant to make a call and set up an appointment. This counts as a career service.
Someone said, but you can count it if you have an established MOU, correct?
You can count referring them to the service. So when you refer a participant, so again, the key word here is participant. If you're just going to the organization and you're presenting on AEL services and learning more about their services, and then you establish an MOU, that's not a career service. The career service is when you refer the participant to receive whatever services they can provide.
Okay, we have some comments.
Yes.
Someone says, is it because you're providing a direct service to a specific individual?
Correct. So it has to be a service directly for or to the participant. So if you're providing transportation services to a participant, that's a career service. If you're referring them to the food bank, that can be counted as a career service. But if you're going yourself to the food bank to just find out what other services the food bank can provide besides food and to let them know about AEL services, that is not a career service. So you want to think of career services as activities, not increments of time. When the information is reported to the federal level, the information reported is how many participants were served, and then after finding out how many career activities were provided, what was the average cost to provide all those services? So for reporting purposes, As per the memo, the denominator is the total number of participants receiving career services, and the numerator is the total number of services that were provided. In this example, we are going to look at one class and see how many service activities were provided and to how many participants during quarter 2. So we can see that Elmo received 6 services, Oscar received 5, Cookie received 7, and Grover received 5. When these are reported, we report that 23 services were provided for 4 people. The second part of this is calculating the average cost of providing the total number of services, and this is what gets entered into CEDAR and what Kara presented on in February. Now let's get into how to enter these services in Teams. So from the participant profile in Teams, you're going to select Career and Training Services. This will take you to the Career and Training Services page. Next step is to click Add Career Service. You see I have that highlighted in orange there. This is where you will enter all the career service details for Teams. I have highlighted different sections in different colors, and we're going to go over each section. The first section is highlighted in yellow, and it's the start and end dates. Career service activities can start and end on different dates, but they cannot cross a month. So if the activity crosses over a month, a new service must be added. Let's go over a few examples. In these examples, the program does intake first and then does orientation on a different day. This does not mean your program has to do it this way, because programs have flexibility to schedule intake and orientation however they think works best for their program. So again, example number 1, let's go back to Elmo. Elmo attends intake on October 29th and is scheduled to return on the 31st for orientation. Elmo then returns on the 31st for orientation. The start date entered would be 10/29/23 and the end date would be 10/31/2023. Now, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but you want to make sure you enter some details in the comments. So for this example, you might put something like participant attended 4 hours of intake, completing table 1112 and enrollment forms, as well as 2 hours of orientation that included the rest of the comprehensive assessment. Let's look at the next example. So in this one, Grover also attended intake on October 29th, but he didn't attend orientation until November 1st. So this is where the service activity crosses over a month. A service would be entered with the start and end date of 10/29/2023, and then another service would be entered with the start and end date of 11/01/2023. And then in the comments, you might put for 10/29 that the participant attended 4 hours of intake, completing testing and enrollment forms. Orientation is scheduled for 10/31. And then for November 1st, you would put participant attended 2 hours of orientation and completed the rest of comprehensive assessment. Intake was on 10/29. And why would you want to put when orientation is scheduled or when they attended intake? That's because intake and orientation, they go hand in hand. And if you're only looking at 1 month, like say you're only looking at November, it may look weird that Grover only attended orientation in that month and he didn't have an intake. So it's highly recommended that you enter your notes that way. Now I'm going to add one more example because these service activities are not one and done, and you can add them multiple times. So if your program prefers, you could also enter each one separately, regardless of whether the activity happens in the same month or not. So for example, here we have that Cookie attended intake on October 29th and an orientation on October 31st with Elmo. But instead of putting a start date of 10/29 and an end date of 10/31, a service activity is going to be entered with the start and end date of 10/29/23. And another service activity could be entered with the start and end date of 10/31/2023. Then you'll want to make sure to notate accordingly in the comments, something like for October 29th, participant attended 4 hours intake, completing testing and enrollment forms, and is scheduled for orientation on 10/31. And then for October 31st, participant attended 2 hours orientation, completing rest of comprehensive assessment. Intake was on 10/29. So in the service type box that I have highlighted here in green, Teams allows you to select 5 different service types, and they're all listed here. And I'm not going to read them all to you because I made a desk aid. So Olga is going to drop that into the chat, and then we can move on to the next slide. For the career service types, here's the desk aid. And we're going to go over each of these, and hopefully you all will get a better understanding of how each of these are used. Now, the wording on the desk aid will look slightly different from the drop-down menu in Teams, but it provides more detail regarding the same activities because I took it from the Octane memo. All right, so let's review it. This chart lists the career service activity. It provides some detail on it, and then it provides an example. Again, these are just examples. These aren't like specifically how you are supposed to be doing everything. So for this first one, we have outreach, intake, and orientation. It's important to remember that not all these service activities can be reported in Teams. Some will only be reported in Cedar, like outreach. But once someone is enrolled and participating in the program, we can start tracking services like intake and orientation. So you'll see the very first one here. I put outreach. It's to promote a summary of services. But again, we don't track outreach in Teams. It gets tracked in Cedar. For intake, it's the process of gathering basic information and determining program appropriateness. And then I have, like doing the Pearl, getting the required documentation, right? And there's just a couple examples. It's not everything. Orientation and introduction to the program that may or may not include a tour. Again, I put may or may not. I added that in there because I think it's a great idea. It's a good best practice. So orientation example is providing information to new students on the mission and vision of the program processes, points of contact, and program expectations, and then taking them on a tour of the campus and/or classrooms. The next one is initial assessment of skills. In the Octane memo, it provides more detail, which it says including literacy, numeracy, and English proficiency, as well as aptitudes, abilities, and supportive service needs. And then in the detail, I put a bunch of different examples of tests that programs have used or can use. So we have like the basic skills tests, we have interest profilers, and then basic needs assessment and the ITEC plan. And then for the example, I put participant received a comprehensive assessment that included the Pearl, ACASAS test, digital literacy skills test, basic needs assessment, and ITEC plan. I did list NRS and non-NRS test lists there because the initial assessment is not just assessment for eligibility. It's any assessment that you provide for the first time.
What if intake and initial assessment on skill level was done on the same day? Would there be 2 entries for the same day?
Yes. Yes, there would. So you would do a career service for intake and a career service for initial assessment. It's asking, can you clarify on outreach? Outreach is going to be when you go out to like say a community event, when you're trying to like recruit participants to the program. So again, this can be counted as a career service if you're recruiting for participants. So if we go back to the early example where I was saying going to an organization and talking to the staff doesn't count as outreach, but let's say you go to the organization and you talk to people that, like, let's say it's a home, right, where they have people living there, or like it's a rehab center, and you go to the rehab center and they have people in their program that you are trying to recruit for AEL services. So because those are potential participants that you're outreaching to, that is a career service. But just talking to the staff of that program is not a career service. So hopefully I've made that a little more clear.
We have another one. Do the students need to have some type of attendance form? Example, student fills out enrollment form online and schedules registration with coming to campus.
No, they do not need to have an attendance form. You are keeping track of your service. Because I'm trying to avoid saying your time because, again, I said we want to think of them in terms of activities and not hours. But I know it does tie to time. And so this is basically you getting credit for that time. And I do want to preface this that another key word here is average. So when you guys are doing this, if like say you forget to count one day when you did something with someone, Career Navigator talked about training with someone and it accidentally got left out. That's okay, because again, this is average. But the examples I'm giving you here and the amount of times that you can count each service is to really help you guys to show the quality of service that you're providing and show like, this is how we're retaining students. This is how we're retaining participants, and this is how we're helping them and supporting them. And I just want you to be able to get credit for all of that. And so I want to show you how you can keep track of all of that. And yes, it might require, like a recommendation I have is maybe keeping a separate spreadsheet so you won't have to go back and like look at every individual participant's profile to try to keep track, but maybe have a spreadsheet that you guys can keep track of the different services that you're providing also so that you can get a better average cost per when you're trying to calculate that for CEDAR later.
There's a follow-up to the student filling out an enrollment form without coming to campus. It says, do we need an attendance form if the student fills out enrollment form in person?
We don't have anything that says we require you to have an attendance form unless that's something that your program requires. So if that's a program preference, then you would abide by that. But we don't require an attendance form for them to fill out the enrollment form or anything.
So you don't have to get a list of the people that you spoke to in order to count for those services.
Nope, you do not need to have a list. Just if, like, say, if monitoring were to look at it and inquire, you could say, oh, we were doing outreach that day. We went to this community event and they were recruiting for participants. And that's good enough. We don't need a list of how many people you guys talked to and who actually showed up to enroll for services.
Okay, I have two comments or clarifications or what have you. So I'm just wanting to know if there is other documentation needed or is entry into Teams enough?
Entry into Teams is sufficient. And then, of course, for outreach, it's going to be for CEDAR.
Okay, and then one more, just to make sure, as I may have missed this, we only get credit for community resources agencies that we have an established MOU with?
No.
No, okay, this limits community resource agencies to refer support services to if an MOU is not present, but they are a known agency for support service referral. So
right. And so that's why I was trying to clarify earlier. You do not have to have an MOU with them. It's just saying if you go, because that paragraph is so long, but what that paragraph was trying to say is if you're going there to outreach and talk to the staff members of an organization that you don't already have an MOU with, that is not a career service. And even talking to them in general, unless you're referring the participant for the service, then it's only when you're referring the participant for the service that it counts as a career service. And you do not have to have an MOU, because the website that I like to promote all the time is findhelp.org. And on that website, if you were to use that website, you're sitting down trying to help somebody find another resource, and you find something on there that you've never heard of before, and they go there, that still counts as a career service. You don't have to have an established MOU.
All right. So when we are recruiting to potential participants, we wouldn't be able to record that into CEDAR?
I think you mean would be. Yeah. So you can't record it in Teams, but you can record it in CEDAR. So it would be the cost of that. So what Kara was talking about last month is like how much time the person spent, and she kind of gave a breakdown of their salary. And so like, let's say you spend 4 hours at an event, how much would the Career Navigator have gotten paid for those 4 hours? And that's what would be counted in CEDAR, not Teams. Next slide, we have a couple more career service types to go over. And that first one there is the provision of performance information and program cost information on eligible provider of education, training, and workforce services by program and type of provider. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but in short, what it means is just like what it says here in the detail, providing a participant with information on an AEL IET and or other training provider options. So the example is the Career Navigator hosts an information session that discusses IETs the program offers, vocational training schools, or post-secondary colleges and or universities that the participant could attend. Okay, so providing them with any career training opportunities beyond regular ESL and HSC services. So IETs and post-secondary vocational training schools. Then we have provision of information on supportive services. That one's really long too, but I kind of shortened it a little bit. And this includes child care, child support, medical or child health assistance that's available through the state's Medicaid program, CHIP, SNAP, EITC assistance under TANF, and other supportive services and transportation. For this one is just providing support service information and referring them to a support service provider or providing an AEL support service. This could be where you have the most career service activity if you're providing referrals to support services and or if your program provides support services. Can anyone tell me real quick, what are the two support services that AEL can provide? One, transportation. What else? There is another support service.
HSC vouchers?
Yes. So transportation and HSC vouchers.
It says, what if we provide services through another department in our agency, not AFLA funded? Do we record that?
Yeah, you can record that because it says here appropriate referrals. So you could still record that as that same service type. So regardless of whether it's AEL that's providing the transportation service or like, let's say they're receiving it from the city, right? And they're getting a bus pass from the city, that's still going to be the same service type. I do want to clarify between number 3 and number 5. Now, number 3 says referral or coordination of other programs and services. And number 5 is provision of information and or referral to supportive services. The desk aid should be able to help you distinguish the difference a little better, but you want to think of the difference between referring someone to a program like Workforce Solutions, VR, or Goodwill, and a program like SNAP or the food bank is that the programs like VR and Goodwill, they're holistic programs. They provide multiple services. They're like a full service program and they require follow-up. They have expected outcomes, just like we do. Whereas programs like utility assistance or the food bank, they're often a one-time service or a very specific type of service. They don't always require follow-up or an expected outcome. So that would be a number 5. So hopefully that helps. And I think I saw some questions popping up.
Someone said, what about a career fair? Would an orientation for IET fall under career services? And then Angela, it says, Kara says, orientation to an IET would count provided it doesn't go into contextualized instruction. But I don't know about career fair. I think what they were talking about was earlier, if you refer your students to a career fair. Donna, is it if you provide a career fair, if you participate in a career fair, or if you refer your students to a career fair? So what is the thought behind the question? Participate. So if you as an adult ed program participate in a career fair, so where would that fall?
So if you're invited to a career fair, like say Workforce Solutions is having like a job fair and you go to that, if you are there to recruit potential participants, that gets counted as outreach in CEDAR, not Teams. So that time and the expense of that time gets recorded in CEDAR, but it does not get recorded in Teams. Because again, for Teams, it's not until somebody enrolls into the program and is participating in services that we can start recording the activities. And then you said something about orientation for an IET. Anything to do with IET, the hours and everything gets counted in training services. So it's separate from career service. Any career service and all that happens once they start an IET all of that is going to be counted in the training services. It doesn't get counted as a career service. So an orientation for an IET would not count because that's going to be included in the IET and that gets counted towards training services. And the training services are tracked separately, whereas career service, this is something new that we're tracking and we're trying to make more clear for you here. Or is there anything else,
I think
Olga, because I lost
Anne
track?
may have wanted to share something.
I just wanted to say, I think you already clarified earlier. Would you say it's correct to say in teams you're reporting career services for participants and in CEDAR for the program overall? So you're doing outreach or info. You don't collect the student data. They're not in teams. So that would be a service you're doing for the program and it would be reported in CEDAR. That's kind of what I understood you just said.
Oh, I like how you said that. Thank you. Yeah, that's very clear.
I guess I'm confused on the orientation that would be given just prior to them starting the IET. You're saying that's considered as like training hours, and that's not considered as the required 3 hours of orientation and assessment that we have to record?
From my understanding, anything to do with IET is not a career service. So I'm going to go ahead and push forward. So the provider section is really easy. If you're part of a consortia, then there will be multiple providers to choose from in the drop-down menu. Just select yours. And if you're working at a site for a sole provider, there will only be one selection for you to choose. So choose that one. The final section highlighted in purple is the comments section. I can't stress enough how important this section is. This is where you will provide the details of the service activity. Earlier, I mentioned possible ways to enter activities for intake and orientation and what the comments might look like because we can enter multiple service activities. Again, so it's important to enter the details here. And why do we do this? Because you want anyone other than yourself looking at this section to be able to see what has been provided, especially for supportive service referrals. It would be best practice for you to enter what kind of supportive service the participant was referred for and where. This is helpful because if one of the staff noticed that a participant has been referred multiple times to different support services, we might want to have a conversation with them about what is the root of these needs. Is it that they don't have any income right now, or they aren't making enough? Is it that they have income, but they're just not budgeting wisely? This may then result in a referral to Workforce Solutions or a staffing company, or maybe it's a matter of poor expense priorities. And then send them to a financial class where they can learn about budgeting and prioritizing expenses. It's also important to remember to enter the details here in the comments and not in the participant notes section. Things you enter in the participant notes section will be for services that you provide that cannot get recorded here. And we also highly recommend that you enter at least your initials after your comments so that if someone else has a question, they know who to contact, or vice versa. If you see someone else has entered a comment and you have a question, you know who to contact. And then finally, down here highlighted in pink, don't forget to save it. You can find the save button right there at the bottom right hand corner, because if it doesn't get saved, all that work that you did entering it, we won't know about it. So now let's go ahead and let's move on to the knowledge check. With these scenarios that I'm going to go over, I want to give you some context. So Elmo, Oscar, Cookie, and Grover, they all attended intake and orientation around the same time frame, and they're all now in the same HSE class. They have all completed an ITech plan. Their program enters intake and orientation as two separate services, so you will see intake and orientation counted twice for each person. This program uses Table 1112 that gets counted once for initial assessment. And finally, this program also assesses participant digital literacy and basic needs when filling out the ITech plan with participants. So it only gets counted as one assessment. So again, the initial assessment of basic skills or supportive service need will also be counted twice. So that's that other service type. So that will also be counted twice in addition to intake and orientation. Shortly after they all reached 12 hours, the career navigator came to their class to talk about IETs that the program offers and gave them all that were present there an interest profiler test. So for the following scenarios, please tell me what career service activities should be counted for quarter two. And we're going to start with Elmo. Elmo attended intake and orientation, took an initial assessment test, and completed an ITEC plan. The ITEC plan, just to remind you, includes the digital literacy and basic needs assessment. Elmo was present the day the career navigator came to visit class and took the interest profiler test. So now you're going to see a pop-up, and I'd like you to tell me which career services should have been entered for quarter two. And then once you make your selections, go ahead and enter which service types should have multiple entries. Like we know for sure, number one should have multiple entries because they do a separate entry for intake and orientation. And then I believe I told you number two, because they do the table 1112, and then they also do the ITEC, which includes the digital literacy and basic needs assessment. There, let's go ahead and go on to the answer. So I have the first one gets marked twice. Intake and orientation is marked twice. And then initial assessment is marked 3 times. Why do I have that marked 3 times? Because they took the table 1112, also the ITEC plan, and then the interest profiler, right? Because Elmo was present and heard about IETs available. So, and took the interest profiler. And then because he was there and heard about the different IETs available, provision of performance or program cost information is also counted. So Oscar, he also attended intake and orientation. He took an initial assessment test and completed an ITEC plan. He was not present the day the career navigator came to visit and has not been to class for almost 3 weeks. The instructor contacts Oscar and finds out his car broke down, is in the shop. The instructor notifies him that the program can provide transportation assistance. So again, go ahead and select which career services should have been entered for quarter two. And then remember what I said about number 3 and number 5. So number 3 is going to be if you're referring them to another program for services, like, and it's going to be a holistic program like, Workforce Solutions, VR, Goodwill. And number 5 is just referring them to receive a supportive service to either AEL or to another program that can provide them the assistance. So here, what I have marked for the answers are outreach, intake, and orientation, because he attended intake and orientation. Initial assessment was for the TABE and for the ITEC plan. He was not present when the career navigator was there, but the instructor did let him know, hey, we provide transportation services. You can get transportation services while your car is getting fixed. And so he got a referral for transportation services, and that's going to be the last one. So hopefully this is helping you guys understand a little bit better. And it's okay if you chose the wrong one. I know this is a lot of information to take in, but hopefully going over these examples helps you understand it a little bit more. So the next one is going to be Cookie, and Cookie attended intake and orientation, took an initial assessment test, and completed an ITEC plan. Cookie was present the day the career navigator visited class and took the interest profiler test. During the presentation, Cookie notified the career navigator that they are running out of food at home, and the career navigator provided them with a list of local food banks in the area. So again, on the pop-up, go ahead and select which career services should be getting counted. For Cookie, we have outreach, intake, and orientations marked twice. Initial assessment is marked 3 times for the TABE, the ITEC, and then for the interest profiler. Cookie was there and got information on the IET services or the IET programs available. And so provision of performance or program cost information gets counted. And then Cookie also received a list of the food banks in the area. So that was provision of information or referral to supportive services. Grover attended intake and orientation, took an initial assessment test, and completed an ITEC plan. He was not present the day the career navigator visited, but did later notify the instructor that he has a disability and needs help. So the instructor referred Grover to vocational rehabilitation for additional assistance. The answer is outreach, intake, and orientation is counted twice for the intake and orientation initial assessment for the TABE and for the ITech plan. Grover did not take the interest profiler because he wasn't there, but he did notify the instructor that he needed some help because he has a disability. And so he was referred to VR. And that's going to be the third one here, which is referral or coordination of other programs and services. Now we've gone over all these scenarios. If you had questions on the scenarios, please put them in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to remind you that tracking cost is the most important thing. The average cost per participant that received career and training services, that's what the Octane memo says. So you want to keep in mind how many participants were served, how many of each type of career service activities were provided, and what was the average cost to provide all those services. And so in case you missed it, Kara did Capturing Career Services Part 1, and that's entering the career services in CEDAR. Are there any questions that I missed from earlier?
There is one. If a student did the iTech and the digital skills on the same day, can both items just be listed on the comments, or are 2 entries required?
They could just be listed on the comments. And you can list it as one service, but you probably want to put in the comments that it was, 2 hours time, or if you're going to keep a spreadsheet, put down like that you spent 2 hours doing that one service versus just like 1 hour in the iTech plan and then 1 hour for the digital skills or whatever, because you want to be able to calculate the average for that time that you spent with them.
And then Linda says, entering career service into the teams also serves as an opportunity to highlight the quality and depth of career navigator staff non-instructional engagement tailored to participants, fostering increased student retention and engagement. Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much, Maria. Great job. A lot of complex information.
Thank you again. Appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Anne, and all of the TWC staff for all your contributions and helping us help our students. So thank you, everyone, for attending Workforce Wednesday.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCAL continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.